Unfolding Mental Illness, hosted by Dr. Sachin Ganorkar. Hello, everyone. FAVME, Family's Voice on Mental Illness, is back with its episodes on unfolding mental illness. We are the regional chapter of FACE-Me India, founded by Dr. Nirmala Srinivasan. We are a group of family carers, and we hope to provide tools and resources to other family carers who are taking care of their loved ones who are suffering with some kind of mental disorder. We hope we are being able to help you out in your journey through these episodes. If you are looking for guidance, support, or community support, or any other kind of support, please do subscribe to our channel. Today's episode is General Myths on Mental Illness. And I am Saraswati Suresh, the founder of FAVME, and our host for today is Dr. Sachin Ganorkar, the founder, member, and director of FAVME. Over to you, Dr. Sachin.
Thank you, Saraswati. Good morning to all. Good morning, Dr. Thara. Our guest for this episode is Dr. Thara Rangaswamy. She is a leading woman psychiatrist in India who co-founded the NGO called SCARF, Schizophrenia Research Foundation, based in Chennai, India. Incidentally, SCARF completes 40 years in February 2024. Thank you for all your effort and your team, which has done a wonderful job. Dr. Thara is a researcher in schizophrenia and community mental health. She is a recipient of many awards, and the recent one, in 2020, she received the Outstanding Clinical and Community Mental Research Health Award of SIRS, which is the Schizophrenia International Research Society, an apex body which works in schizophrenia. In 2022, she received the Nari Shakti Puraskar for creating awareness about mental disorders. She is our perfect guest for this week in International Women's Day. It is an utmost privilege to have a leading woman psychiatrist on our show who has an experience of more than 45 years. Dear Doctor, the theme for this International Women's Day is Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. What would be your advice to women mental health professionals?
I don't think women mental health professionals are very different from male mental health professionals in that we do the same kind of job. We handle the same kind of clients, patients, whatever, and talk to the families the same way. Of course, some of us have more of an inclination to clinical work, some of us towards research or community mental health or whatever. But where the difference comes is probably in the way they have to juggle around between family, children, and sometimes in-laws, sometimes her own parents, and her work. And then, of course, there are pregnancies, there are deliveries, there are various, then there's menopause, there are various biological life events as well. I think that is where probably women feel a little more stressed. But I also think that women are inherently stronger and therefore are able to cope with many of these issues as well. So my message to women would be, go on. I mean, you are really the pride of the team, and you should never give up hope, and you should go on with your work. Whatever makes you happy and whatever gives comfort to the patients and their families.
Wonderful, Doctor. I think that's a great message for me, Saraswati, and the family team. And it's very inspiring of what you have said based on your experience for the last 45 plus years. So thank you very much. Moving to our episode, my and Saraswati's and the family's interaction with the lay people brought us to certain questions. And based on that, our topic for today's episodes is general myths on mental illness. Our format for this episode is going to be slightly different, where it's going to be like a rapid fire yes and no, and a brief response for 20 to 30 seconds. We know that you have a tremendous research background, and I was reading about your Madras Longitudinal Study, and I'll start firing the questions now. So is it okay? Should we start?
Yeah, you can start, but all responses cannot be 20 to 30 seconds because
Absolutely.
some of the questions probably require a little more elaborate response.
Correct. Yes, but we wanted to educate lay people. So, we could talk a little bit more longer, but we wanted to cover a lot of questions which people keep asking us. So, we are totally flexible on that. Thank you. So my first question is mental illness hereditary or genetically transmitted?
Not all mental disorders, but many of them are, like schizophrenia, major depression, even alcohol abuse. All these do have a genetic transmission, although the exact mode of transmission has not been determined.
Right. Question number 2, are parents or family environment directly responsible for mental illness?
Long ago, parents used to be blamed for everything that happened to children, but we know now that is not the case. So, parents per se cannot be blamed, nor the environment alone can be blamed. Mental disorders, like many other disorders like diabetes, is a mixture of genetic, environmental, family issues, and the inherent personality of the person. So I don't think, I mean, this is not really a blame game. So I don't think we need to say that so and so is responsible for this.
Great, that's a perfect answer. Thank you. Uh, do weak people get mental illness? Do weak people get mental illness?
First
Weak.
of all, I don't agree with the use of the term weak. When you say weak, is it physically weak or there is nothing called mental weakness? I mean, either there is a mental, there is a retardation of mental faculties which amounts to intellectual disabilities. But otherwise, we don't actually call anybody mentally weak. But in common parlance, we say that, yeah, so and so is very strong. She can handle any stress. But so and so is
Absolutely.
not so strong. Yes.
Correct. Correct. So that was
Yeah. So they do not
that
get
was
mental disorders, but they are more vulnerable to day stresses in life. So therefore
correct.
they are more vulnerable, especially to the common mental disorders like depressions or anxiety or things like that.
Right. So this was a question which people kept saying, so that's why we deliberately included this.
Not an issue.
Does marriage cure mental illness?
No, no, no. Marriage does
Okay.
not cure anything in my experience. It does not cure anything at all. Certainly not mental illness, and in many cases we have seen it actually jeopardize the course of many severe mental disorders like schizophrenia.
Why is it so difficult to seek help for mental disorders by family and society?
Well, I should say over the last 20 years, things are getting better. People are coming to us for all kinds of issues. But I think the main difficulty is one, lack of awareness that it is a psychological problem. Two, a denial. No, this can never happen to me. It has never happened to anybody in my family. We cannot be mentally ill. And three, of course, is stigma.
Right. Is dying by suicide a sign of weakness in this competitive world? And is it actually the survival of the fittest?
What was the first part of your question?
Is dying by suicide a sign of weakness in this competitive world? And is it the survival of the fittest?
No,
That's what we
again,
need to hear in media.
very
Yeah.
often suicide is a very impulsive act. It need
Okay.
not necessarily denote the weakness, as you call it. Just at that point in time, the person feels that life is unbearable. There is no support. There is no help for him, and therefore he chooses to kill himself. So we do know that if that at that point in time he gets support, then there's a lot of ambivalence in the minds of suicide to do or not to do. So if at that point in time he gets support either from a professional or from a family member, then very often he is able to change his mind and not go ahead with the suicide.
Thank you. Okay. That's a great answer. Thank you very much. Can people snap out of mental disorders, for example, depression, by going on a vacation or by a change of place?
they can snap out of mental disorders, but I would not say just changing the place helps serious kinds of mental disorders. It may help a kind of loneliness, it may help mild, very mild, minor depressions. Yes, for those things, definitely a change in environment, having to see new people and all that might help, but not really in the case of more serious depression or other kinds of disorders.
Does yoga, spirituality, or willpower cure people of mental disorders?
First of all, I don't think you can club all of them. I mean, each one is very distinct and different. Yoga is, there is some evidence base that yoga helps depression, anxiety, dealing with stress. We need a little more literature as far as yoga in severe mental disorders is concerned, but it is gathering steam. Then willpower, yeah, willpower is the inherent faculty of a person to be able to fight stress or to be able to do something that he or she wants to. That is willpower. And what was your third?
Spirituality. Spirituality.
Spirituality is a huge world by itself, but I'm not sure. While spirituality certainly is what to say, a support element by itself. You know, people who are spiritual do go and seek support, but we don't have data. As a researcher, I would only say that we have not studied it very effectively, but we have seen it help others.
Great. So the next question is, are all people living with mental disorders violent?
Not at all.
Can they harm
I have
people
been saying this
physically
repeatedly.
when they go near them? Yes.
No, in countries like India, probably around 30% are violent, and even those people are violent if they are provoked. Very often, people are not. If you just leave them alone, they are very much like animals. You know, if you leave them alone, they are into themselves. But only if provoked, either it may be a family member or somebody on the street, yes, then they can become violent. But if you look at Western literature and Indian literature, we have very less of violence in our country.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. How does one differentiate how a normal person behaves, which is an evil behavior, and behavior in a mental disorder, so as to draw a line in using terms? For example, you are mental, you are depressed, you are a psycho, you are a lunatic, or you should go to an asylum. So normally bad behavior is clubbed with mental health terms. Yeah, bad behavior is clubbed with mental health terms. And is there a need to separate the vocabulary when you're trying to define bad behavior versus a behavior in a mental disorder?
See, bad behavior is a very loosely used term. You know, I mean, it can start from children, parents, whatever. I mean, we don't have an operational definition for bad behavior, but we do have an operational definition for behaviors caused because of mental disorders.
Correct.
You know, for example, talking to oneself, smiling to oneself, you know, neglecting hygiene. Okay, once in a way, if provoked, becoming irritable, angry, throwing things. All this can be termed so-called bad behavior, but these are essentially born out of the fact that they are arising out of a disorder, just like you have convulsions in a person with epilepsy. It's somewhat
Correct.
similar to that, you know. So and as far as using terms like that is concerned, we have really been talking to many people, including media, not to use such terms. For example, media, newspapers very often
Correct.
comes up with headlines like "psycho killer," you know, or a
Absolutely.
psychotic
That's
man kills his mother. Every day, millions of mothers are being killed, not all by persons with mental illnesses, right?
correct.
So it's partly the media which has a role to play, and we should certainly avoid using it.
Thank you.
Because it certainly adds to the stigma and it lowers the self-esteem of the person who actually suffers from the disorder.
Correct. Thank you. How does one introduce proper vocabulary at what level so that poor mental health and mental illness is not used as a term to insult a person?
Poor mental health, I mean, we don't very often refer to poor mental health, but we say that, like you said earlier, you're not strong enough or you're very weak, and therefore you're not able to handle the situation. I don't think anybody says you have poor mental health. I don't think that is. I don't think that happens.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah, so this is what we have heard from people, and that's why we have put those questions. I understand. I know as since we've interacted, but we get to hear this from people, and that's why we have put those questions to get a clarification. Is visiting a psychiatrist equal to madness? Why is it so difficult to seek help?
Not at all.
Yeah,
Now, 5 out of my 10 people who visit me in my clinic don't do it for so-called psychiatric reasons or because they have a psychiatric diagnosis. Very often it is for an interpersonal conflict,
absolutely.
intergenerational conflict, or the conflict with peers at the workplace or with bosses, you know, and of
Correct.
course the all embracing love affair that these kids go through at a very early age, and they don't know how to handle it. Uh, Mother-in-law, daughter-in-law issues. I mean, actually, things are changing. The spectrum of people who come to us is really changing.
Right. So me, Saraswati, and Fahmi always grapple with this, that how do you teach lay persons to help a person living with mental illness, or a family whose loved one is living with mental illness, or a person who's roaming in the streets? How do we educate lay persons about mental illness?
See, you can talk to them about many things, dopamine, serotonin, blah, blah, all that. That is not going to appeal at all. Okay. The best thing that I have found is showcase to them a person who has improved. A
Got it.
person who carried a diagnosis of schizophrenia or bipolar or major depression, was on brink of suicide, who had mental health intervention, either maybe a professional or not, sometimes not even a professional, by a very understanding family, and now is able to function well. You know, he may be on medication, but nevertheless, he is able to function, he or she, and able to contribute to society. The more we showcase such people, it is such things that the community believes. They don't believe your theoretical stuff, you know. I mean, because
Got
they
it.
feel you have a hidden agenda.
Got it. Similar to this, how does one address fears of lay people who want to interact with a person living with mental illness or who had a diagnosis before? Lay people are actually a little scared to go near a person who had a diagnosis or who's living with a diagnosis.
But very often they don't even know who has mental illness and who does not. For
Correct,
example, if
correct,
you go to Accountant General's office, you will find that 10 out of 200 people will have some kind of, they'll be under treatment. And the guy sitting next to him won't even know that he has a problem. It's
correct.
only
Yeah,
the moment you say, "Oh, do you know he's going to mental hospital?" Only then the fear comes in people's minds. So you've
correct.
got to tell them, out of this 1 year that you were staying with him and you're working with him, did he hurt you or harm you in any way?
Very nice.
Therefore,
Very
it is
true.
not really the individual, but it is just the thought in your mind and the stereotypes which are associated with mental disorders that makes you afraid.
Right. So we are part of self-help groups, and there is suffering for caregivers. How different is the suffering of a person or a family living with mental illness and other disorders? How can we educate people more about it?
Actually, nowadays families know a lot. You know, I mean, if you take the average urban family, they are very, of course, thanks to all the social media and the internet, everybody knows a lot. And sometimes the kind of questions they ask us, they are quite daunting even to us. But what they probably need is a kind of emotional support, which is sometimes lacking either from their own family because the sons are not here, people are away, people don't have the time,
Correct.
and the kind of social support. Sometimes they may need help even to take the person to the hospital. So that is the kind of support that families need, not so much in terms of information. That is my feeling now. Of course, we are
Great,
not
great,
talking about rural families. I'm talking of the average urban family.
great. Can people living with mental disorders stay with their families and lead productive lives? Or as perceived, is putting the person in rehab the only solution?
No, no, no. They cannot stay in families. In fact, in India, even my follow-up study has shown that 95% of people who have been followed up for 35 years are still living with families.
Great. Great.
They may not be terribly happy, but that is at least they have a safe roof over their heads and they have meals 2 times a day. Okay,
Great. Thank you.
especially for women. I'm saying they're not on the streets, they're not abused, right?
Correct.
So I think it is perfectly okay for them to stay with families, provided the families are able to take them in and deal with them in a more effective manner.
Right.
And depending on the level of disability, they can contribute to society or contribute to the families.
Right. So just to follow up with that, can carers and families cope with mental disorders at home under the guidance of qualified mental health practitioners?
Of course, in
Can,
India, we are doing it all the time, aren't we? All the
correct.
time we are doing it. Of course, there are some cases where it is difficult to have, especially if you have an elderly person with a problem and you have young children in the home, then it becomes difficult to balance them out. But there are exceptions, but the run-of-the-mill person with mental disorders is now living with a family in India.
How do lay people at family make mental disorders more visible so that people don't feel shy or ashamed to seek help, not fear a job loss in case their workplace finds it out?
Yeah, see, luckily, now we have some of these film stars and celebrities talking about mental health, which is a great thing now. It never used to happen 20 years ago. So now you have Deepika Padukone and few other stars, and even some cricketers saying, we went through a
Correct.
big depression and all that. So this is normalizing depression or normalizing a mental disorder or an emotional state. So once that is done, then people understand that it can happen to A, B, C, it can happen to me as well, or it can happen to my son or to my daughter. And again,
Correct. Got it.
this job business is a tricky one. Sometimes it helps to tell the boss that you have a problem. Sometimes it does not help. So you have to play your cards very carefully. But there are any number of people with severe mental disorders who are working, and they do
Correct.
hold
Correct.
the jobs.
Should families, governments spend on a non-communicable disease like mental disorders? As the general perception is that spending money and resources on mental disorders is a waste of money. There is no returns of investment, and money should be invested somewhere else to get more productive returns.
So what happens if you don't invest money on him? What do you want to do with him? That is my question. You just want to let him rot. He's your son. She's your daughter. I mean, what really is the option? And I will not agree that it is a waste of investment, putting it in a very crude way. But I think it is an investment that you make emotionally, physically, by doing things for the person, financially. What do you do for a person with strokes? What do you do for a
Correct.
person with paraplegia? I mean, there are any number of illnesses that I can talk about, but there we do not think in terms of return. We think of what is the best thing we can do in order to make the person come to the pre-morbid level. That is to the level that he or she was before the illness. Well, it works for many people. It does not work for a few. But uh, that is something that you ought to do for your loved one, irrespective of what the outcome is going to be.
Great. Are psychiatric medicines addictive? That's a common response we get.
Not addictive. The minor tranquilizers are addictive. For example, the diazepam group, the clonazepam group, some of the medicines that we give for anxiety, they're habit forming. Therefore, they have to be tapered off in a very systematic way and tell the person outright it will be difficult for you to stop. Don't try to stop it abruptly, try to taper it down. So it has to be dealt with in a very careful manner.
Is it necessary to have lab tests or biomarkers like serotonin in diagnosing mental disorders?
No, there is no need. I think a clinical judgment is, and sitting with a family, sitting with a person is the best way to diagnose.
Right. Can digital health, telehealth helplines break the stigma and provide anonymity in seeking help for people?
Well, see, digital health has come a long way ever since we first started telepsychiatry, and now the Prime Minister has inaugurated this telemanas, which is supposedly doing very well. It provides anonymity. The sense you sit in a room and nobody sees you. You sit in a room and you talk to the doctor, and other 100 people sitting in the waiting in the outpatient department do not see you. But again, I do not know if that is good or bad, because it sometimes helps to come out and look at other people, who are less severely disturbed or more severely disturbed than you. But yes, it helps because, especially older people who are not able to travel, and in the case of some persons who do not want to come to the facility very often, it may be distance, it may be money, it may be many other things. In many of those conditions, it helps. It is a good complementary system for any mental health facility. That is what I would say.
Thank you. What is the difference between general counseling and psychotherapy?
General counseling is what your grandmother or grandfather can give you at home. They say that it is very at present. You say, okay, you have this problem, you have failed in your exam, what do you do? Your wife wants a divorce, what do you do? I mean, that is a very cross-sectional kind of thing. And that is counseling, and they help you, they support you, they build your tenacity to cope with issues. That is counseling, right? But psychotherapy is more deeply rooted. It is rooted in many theories of psychology. For example, there is psychoanalytical psychotherapy. A lot of other psychotherapies are there. And psychotherapy is not meant to solve a particular crisis in life. It is more longitudinal. It analyzes you as a person and how you cope with the various problems in your life.
Thank you. Why is there a dichotomy when the society celebrates painters like Van Gogh, who made brilliant paintings, and he's celebrated 100 years later, and a general hate and aversion towards people who live with mental disorders, but could be equally productive if given the support?
See, Van Gogh, I just went Van Gogh new exhibition in Chennai just 2 days ago. Fascinating. I mean, but we all knew Van Gogh before that. Van Gogh was not famous during his time.
Correct.
Please understand that.
Yes, correct.
He was in poverty. People only his there's one postman in his life who was his only support. People did not support him. If you
Correct.
look at many artists, they are not supported during their lifetime. Much later, even Leonardo da Vinci, for example. I mean, Da Vinci's paintings came up much later, sculptures came up much later. So it is only much later that people really recognize you. And then there is this discussion that's going on. Why did he cut his ear? Was it due to this? Was it due to that? So what we see now is only the paintings of Van Gogh. We don't see so much the man behind the paintings. Although the bulk of his paintings are self-portraits, a very serious looking person.
Right. So how do we address this aversion towards people who live with mental disorders, but can also be equally productive if today we are 100 years after Van Gogh? How can we create an environment which actually supports people who live with mental disorders?
I strongly believe in showcasing success stories. Nothing like that. If you say so and so is this had, antipsychotic medication and is now okay, able to hold a job, able to support the family. Nothing like that. That is what you people do when you try to change the perceptions of persons with mental illness by merely showcasing these people. It may be a child, it may be a person who has stopped drinking. No, it could be, and has gone back to his job. It could be any of these issues, you know. But that is the only thing that people understand and people identify with.
Great. With your immense amount of experience for 45 years and the change which you have seen for so many years, how do you see the institution of work, marriage, etc., in terms of mental health? You also have seen COVID, and with your research, with your longitudinal studies, which you have done for so many years, how do you see this entire scenario of mental health changing from where you started roughly 45 years back? And what do you see for mental health in future?
See, the scenario is changing in the sense as I told you earlier, there are more people coming to us for help. There are more people going to counselors for help. And they're all not people who are suffering from severe mental disorders, even minor emotional disturbances. So they do understand that there are people who will help you without labeling you or without judging you, so they offer you unconditional support and help. I think that definitely, post COVID, what has happened is a lot more younger people are coming for help. I mean, that is definitely happening. People, because people do understand depression, anxiety, and so on. So that way, it is changing. As far as medication is concerned, yes, a few therapies have been introduced now, which are very effective. A few of the medicines are effective, but medicines are always a double-edged sword. You have effects, you have side effects, and you have to deal with both. You know, but and the other good thing that is happening is the media is writing much more about mental illness and mental disorders, which never used to be the case 30 years ago. You know? So I would say that I would like to take these as positive indicators and believe that mental health is going to have a better future in the years to come.
Thank you. With your research in community and mental health, how do you see the institution of work and marriage changing with mental disorders? People were averse to hire people, or as you rightly said, you do certain aspects of transmission. People are averse to the marital institutions. How do you see it changing as a researcher?
Well, just on the lighter side, many people don't want to get married now. I mean, I'm talking of normal
Yes.
people. They either don't want to get married or they just want a live-in relationship, which is very good. Uh, and that's good for persons with mental disorders because there is no permanent commitment. But that apart, and middle class people, we still want, marriage and work and things like that. Uh, I think work, definitely that things are improving because many business entrepreneurs, even middle level entrepreneurs, they do recognize that persons with emotional disorders can do some work. They may not do as much as a so-called normal person, but they do understand that. I think that understanding is coming because they themselves see it in their families and see it in other places. Uh, Marriage is still a dicey one because I find that in the younger generation, the tolerance for many things is not high. We used to tolerate much more, whether it was mother-in-law or whatever it is. But now people are not ready to tolerate many things, and if the so-called two persons without any mental disorders are unable to tolerate each other, I don't know what it will be when one of them is emotionally disturbed. I mean, it's anybody's guess,
I, Saraswati, and the family team would like to thank you, and it's been a great talk. We also wanted your advice in terms of what should organizations like us do in terms of advocacy, since we are trying to get mental awareness to the lay people. We would benefit immensely from your wealth of experience of what we should focus to get mental health more to people, to the lay persons and the general public at large.
Yeah, see, advocacy can take many shapes. It can be just awareness building at a minimum. It's awareness building. Then it can be with regarding what is the opinion about all the acts that have been passed, the Mental Health Care Act and the Disability Act. Do you, as family groups, do you approve of that? What is your opinion about that? And and definitely with the media, I think you must form a strong lobby, because what the media thinks, we talk, media thinks we have a hidden agenda. We don't. But I think coming from families and coming from persons with lived experience, they will understand why they should not portray mental illness in a very bizarre way, and how they're
Yes.
adding up to the stigma. And even other things like disability benefits that are not being given to persons with severe mental disorders. You can strongly lobby for all that, because you are actually the beneficiaries of the program, unlike us.
Right. Uh, so just a last question, which is based on your experience, which is the biggest myth you would like to break in mental disorders for the lay people,
mental
or the
illness
biggest
can
myth
never
which?
be Mental illness can never be cured.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Right.
Thank you, Dr. Thara, for your time. It's a great privilege, and it's a deep gratitude that you could spare your time, and we can't thank you enough uh, with the time and your wisdom which you have imparted to our team today. So, so thank you very much.